my god, there's sweat dripping down my face. Let me just do this for like 5 minutes. Hello dearest friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to discuss with you some popular books that I just really didn't like. Some of these books I finished, some of them I DNF'd, and I know you're gonna yell at me about those ones and say, well, it's worth it at the end. You can't say you hate it if you didn't finish it. Yes, I can. If a book isn't good until the end, it's not a good book. I'm going to do my best to also make this as spoiler-free as possible while still trying to give good explanations for why I didn't like the books. We're going to see how that goes, because for some of them I think the spoilers would be the, key reason I didn't like them. So I'm just gonna try. And if I make no sense, it is what it is. That's just a classic video for old Jules. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 3 days a week. Book number 1 on my list here is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. The first thing I need to say about this book is that previously to lurking on Bookstagram and then joining Bookstagram, I was in a reading drought of like 5 years. I hadn't really sat down and read a book in a long time, and the ones that I had tried, I DNF'd them, and it wasn't for me. And looking at my surroundings now, it might be hard to believe that my partner of 9 years didn't even know I liked books until about 2 years ago. When I joined Book Talk and Bookstagram, my world was reopened to books. I started reading again, and The Bone Shard Daughter was maybe the 3rd fantasy book that I got into once I was back into reading regularly. So when I first read The Bone Shard Daughter, I was like amazed. I thought this was so good. I thought it was 5 stars. So much so that I actually forced my partner to listen to the audiobook. We can talk about the acting of the audiobook another time, but I can just tell you now it's not great. When he finished the audiobook, he came to me and said, hey Jules, that book wasn't very good. And I was like, what are you talking about? That book's amazing. And then I sort of flipped through it again and actually reread it a second time, having now read 10, 15, 20 more fantasy books, and kind of went, oh, I was just enchanted by reading anything fantasy and didn't realize that The Bone Shard Daughter, while it has its merits and it's not terrible, is not 5 stars for me. My actual rating of The Bone Shard Daughter overall is probably more like 3.5 stars. I did really enjoy the two POV characters because I forgot that the other ones even existed. Yeah, only 2 of the POV characters actually stand out in my mind. Lynn and Jovis, the first 2 we get, who fill out most of the story. I also think The Bone Shard Daughter has one of the most phenomenal animal companions of all time, and I stand by that. Mephi is a treasure. The things that unfortunately just didn't work for me the most, though, were that the twists were, you could see them coming from a mile away, and they were cool, but it just wasn't set up very well in my opinion. And then there's something strange about the way this book is written as well that is not an issue, but it wasn't my favorite, is that the 2 main characters, Jovis and Lynn, are written in first person perspective, while the rest of the POV characters are written in third person. And to me, it wasn't even really noticeable at first, but there was something wrong. There was something that made these other POV characters just seem so much less important than Jovis and Lynn, and it occurs to me now that it's the fact that they were written in third person rather than first person. So we're very disconnected from the other characters, and it's unfortunate because those characters have very interesting subplots that tie in equally as importantly as Lynn and Jovis. Especially Jovis, because Lynn, you could argue, is the most important character. She's the Bone Shard Daughter and, continues to be extremely important throughout the series. But Jovis is still just a sort of side character compared to her. So why is he written in first person while the other characters like Sand, Ronami, and Falu, I don't know how to say her name, but why are they written in third person when Jovis gets to be written in first person, and Lynn as well? I own the second book in the series. I haven't read it yet. I do plan on purchasing the 3rd book to sort of round out the trilogy once it's available in paperback, because I do really like the covers. It's probably my favorite part for me. The second book I want to talk about today is another one that I read relatively quickly after getting back into reading because it was blowing up all over Book Talk and Bookstagram when I, first started getting back into it. I had read other books by this author prior to going into my 5-year reading slump, I read the Shades of Magic series and loved it. So when I was gifted a copy of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, I was like, yes, this is going to be the best thing I've ever read. Oh boy. I would like to preface this as well by saying I just think this is not for me. I generally am not a fan of contemporary fantasy or urban fantasy, whatever you'd like to call it. And despite the fact that this book takes place over a 300-year span, it's like 99% set in the present. The point of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is probably more of a character study about immortality and needs versus wants and the importance of living in the moment, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. That's the thing. This book takes place over 300 years, like I said, so a ton of historical events should be taking place in the backdrop of this really cool, unique immortality story, but they're not. We get like little glimpses of like, oh yes, and then the war happened, but we don't see any of it. We really just have Addie feeling sorry for herself the whole time and regretting the deal that she made with the devil. We constantly get this reference to the 7 freckles that she has that look like a constellation, and they're even depicted on the cover and on the spine and on the inside, and how men are just mesmerized by her beauty and the 7 freckles that look like a constellation. But like, what was the point? There's references to it in the beginning where, you know, each of the freckles represents a love that she will have or a god that is watching over her. But then that never comes to anything. It's just nonsense that was said at the start of the book. V.E. Schwab was like, what can I do to create this unique feature on my character's face that makes her prettier and stand out more? And then she forgot to do anything with it. That being said, I DNF'd this book at about 75%, so maybe something happens with it later on, but I don't think it does. I don't think the final moments of the book are going to be some big revelation about her stupid 7 freckles that look like a constellation. One thing that this book had that I did love was one of my favorite tropes, which is meddling gods. And that comes, of course, in the form of Luke, who is literally the devil. He pops in from time to time just to sort of mess with Addie while also guaranteeing her safety. And I think his character could have been so interesting if the book had been about him. If this book had just been about Luke being the devil and making deals with people and seeing his process of deciding who to make deals with and upholding them, that's like so much more interesting than watching Addie just walk around New York. Let me know if I should give The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue a second chance. I might, but this one is far less likely than the others. I feel like with each book on this list, people are just going to start hating and hating even more, and I'm sorry. The next book on the list is Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. I've chosen to talk about Dance of Thieves more as a representation of a category that I don't like rather than this specific book itself. This is going to be an example of why I DNF almost every single YA fantasy book I try to read. I thought that the writing was great. I thought the world building was fairly unique. I loved the outlaw cowboy vibes that we get from the Ballinger family compared to the like Slavic city vibes that we get from everything else. Doesn't make any sense, but I'm here for it. The reason I don't make it through most YA fantasies is because the buildup is there. The buildup is fun. We've got some violence, we've got some sexy stuff, we've got good character building, but then there's nowhere to go that is a place that I'm going to enjoy. YA is so constricted to being appropriate for children. The character actions don't make as much sense because teenagers in YA books tend to not act like real people. They're sort of relegated to acting like children rather than acting like adults. I think in real life, a lot of teenagers thrust into situations like the ones that they get into in Dance of Thieves, as well as almost all the other YA books out there, they would act in the more adult way. And unfortunately for me and for Dance of Thieves, around the halfway mark, it devolved into a will they, won't they, enemies to lovers story rather than the like cool fantasy that was building up previously. So I could be wrong because again, I didn't finish it. So maybe we get more sick action going on and less like, we like each other, but our families hate each other. Something else I want to point out that's not like overly specific to this book, but is something I've seen a lot in YA and then some adult fantasy as well, is that, you know, we get the maps of the world. I don't know if they're just not to scale or something, but it's like we get every single climate possible in this tiny country. We've got the winter area, we've got the desert area, we've got the forest area, we've got the mountain range, we've got the sea, but there's also a different sea that's completely different, like 10 miles away. I just think it's really funny. It doesn't make any sense. I'm literally sweating off my makeup, like, oh my god. Book number 4, you can see exactly where I stopped reading it because I left the jacket flap folded in on page 141. This is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. And again, I'm going to be using this more as an example of a category that I don't like versus the book itself, although I did not like this book. Little Fires Everywhere was something I picked up again before getting back properly into reading, so I think I was just walking through a bookstore and was like, I should really get a book. Oh, this one's got the Heather's Pick sticker on it. I'll probably like it. I was wrong. I don't like general fiction. I don't like thrillers. Not that this is a thriller in any way. I just don't like contemporary stuff. It's not their fault. This book specifically, however, was so slow. I know that people like it, and you know, there's a hit TV show now with Reese Witherspoon in it, and people adore Celeste Ng. And I'm not saying she's a bad writer. I can't say that. Of course she's a good writer. We know this. With this though, I found just the themes and the characters were being shoved into my face. One of the main themes that this book tackles is that the suburbs are not always as they seem. We know this. I grew up in suburbs. They're weird and people have shit going on that they don't talk about and that might be a little nefarious. It's not a new theme, and it's not even really a new take on this theme. Every single character in this book was also a cliche through and through, especially the Richardson family. It was like, you know, the cookie cutter parents, and then each child was an embodiment of the Breakfast Club. And that's all they were. And we have the other protagonist, Mia Warren, who comes in as this like artsy, cool mom. Something that I've seen written about this book a few times and that I absolutely felt myself while reading it was that Mia was sort of holier than thou. She's the good one. And it was like all characters that like Mia are good guys and all characters that don't like Mia are bad guys. And if you think anything else, you're wrong. I think that if she had just written the characters more independently from Mia and not basing how the reader is supposed to feel about them on their relationship to Mia, we would have come to the correct conclusions anyways. We would have liked the characters that are supposed to be liked and disliked the characters that are supposed to be hated on her own. The whole time she's put on this pedestal of being the most amazing mother in the world, and then you find out more of her backstory and she's a bad person. You might disagree with me on that based on her actions, and I'm not going to get too much into it because I don't want to get too much into the realm of surrogacy and interracial adoptions and abortion and pregnancy, but Mia is not a good person. Now, before I show you the 6th book, because you're gonna yell at me, I need to say I'm halfway through this book. I haven't officially DNF'd it. I will complete it, but I don't know when. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. The only reason this book is on the list is because I don't really get why people freak out about Brandon Sanderson. Okay, no, it's unfair for me to say that I don't get why people like Brandon Sanderson, because I do get it. This is exceptionally well written. His world building's fantastic, and the way he ties stories together, I've heard, is really well done. But I don't know like where he came from. Why all of a sudden everyone in the world is obsessed with Brandon Sanderson. I think that when it comes to epic fantasy and classic fantasy, this is pretty good. But there are books that I think are better. There are authors that I think are better. And I don't know. Obviously, I haven't read much of Brandon Sanderson's work, but I don't find what I have read to be like wholly mind-blowingly original, the way that Sander fans would have you believe. I don't know. I don't want to dig myself into a hole of hating on Brandon Sanderson and having people get mad at me, because maybe all of my opinions are entirely unfounded. That's absolutely possible, and I will accept it if I'm wrong. Am I going to finish The Way of Kings? Yes, because I have a video planned where it's required of me to finish The Way of Kings. So I'll get there, and then we'll see if I continue the series, but I don't know if I will. The very last book I want to talk about today shouldn't really even be on this list because I only just started reading it the other day and I'm not very far into it, but I feel like I have to talk about it because when we're talking about popular books, Right now, the most popular book for some reason is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I bought this book out of peer pressure. Everyone has it, and it's really pretty to look at. I don't want to let what I've heard about the book be my final judgment on it. I've heard a lot of really good reviews. So many 5-star reviews on Instagram, mostly from romance blogs, but that's fine. Some of my friends that are more fantasy oriented read this book and they're like, yeah, it's romantasy, which is the combination of romance and fantasy. A lot of the dragon stuff happens off screen while the sex is happening on screen, and it's like, okay, if that's what you want, great, but that's not what I want dragons. The biggest reason I'm including this book on this list though is because I'm reading this at the exact same time that I'm reading Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee, which is very similar to the Dragon Rider Apprentice style, except for her, it's rocks, which are big birds. So Fonda Lee's book is about a rock riding apprentice fighting manticores, and this is about a dragon riding apprentice. And I've seen dragon riding a lot. And every time I go to pick up this book, I immediately put it down and I go back to Untethered Sky. I can't help it. I just really want to read that one. But Untethered Sky is very short and I'm going to finish it probably today. And then I'll have all the time in the world to finish reading Fourth Wing. Or to DNF it, like I do with every other book I've ever tried to read that's popular on Instagram or Book Talk. When it comes down to it, I feel like Book Talk and Bookstagram and Book Twitter are very romance oriented and romantasy oriented and dark fantasy oriented, where dark fantasy really just means romance but a bit darker. And so a lot of the books that come out as very popular, the ones that end up trending, are not books geared towards readers like me. I find it extremely easy to do those posts where it's like books that I don't see on Book Talk enough, because like 80% of what I have on my shelves I've never seen on Book Talk. And I'm not trying to be some like what I read is better than what you read, because like I've said, everyone is entitled to love what they love, and we shouldn't shame anyone for liking the type of books that they like. You can read whatever you want, and there are people out there that read the same things. So ultimately, what I think I'm trying to say is that just because something is very popular and trendy doesn't mean it's going to be for you, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I hate seeing people crap all over popular Bookstagram and Book Talk books and authors and accounts just because it's not their genre. I could really make a list of hundreds of books I didn't like, but those I think are the most popular ones. A lot of books I didn't like aren't popular for a reason, they're just not good. Let me know if any of the books I talked about are your favorites, or if you hated them as well. Remember to be nice to each other. Just because someone doesn't like a book that you like doesn't mean they're a bad person. Before I go, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 3 days a week. I love you guys. Goodbye.